Drupal, like any software application, needs to be installed on a computer in order to run. You're probably familiar with installing software on a desktop or laptop computer. However, Drupal runs on a web server. Thus, the installation process is somewhat different. In this tutorial, we'll review the requirements for installing Drupal and provide some hints to assure your installation runs well. Web servers run a set of services that work together to produce web pages. The services that run in a particular environment are collectively called the server stack. Drupal has 4 core services it needs in order to run it all. But there are several other services that you will likely want as a part of your stack in order to support all of Drupal's features and to make managing your site easier. Now, Drupal's server stack might sound complex, but don't worry. All of these services are pretty standard and readily available on common web server packages, but it doesn't hurt to know the specifics. The first requirement is the operating system. While your personal computer probably runs Windows or the Mac OS, servers tend to run specialized operating systems. The preference here is for Linux or some other variant of Unix. Windows Server OSs may also be used. The next service you're going to need is a web server. Now, I realize that this term can be a little confusing. What I'm referring to is the web server software, not the computer the software is running on, which is also commonly called a web server. Apache is the recommended server application. Microsoft's Internet Information Server and others can also be used. The next service you're going to need is a database engine for Drupal to store its data. MySQL is the recommended engine. PostgreSQL is also popular. And starting with Drupal 7, Drupal uses a new database connection layer called PDO. Theoretically, Drupal will work with any PDO-compliant database, including Microsoft SQL Server and Oracle. Finally, you'll need an interpreter to run Drupal's code. PHP is the programming language that Drupal is written in. PHP is very common and is the most popular language for open-source web apps. Here you're going to need PHP version 5.2.5 or higher. There are some additional requirements that are important to keep in mind. The main one of these is that you're going to need a method for getting Drupal's files onto the server. There are 2 primary ways of doing this, FTP and command line. FTP is generally the easier mechanism for non-technical people to use. The way this works is that you use an FTP client to log onto your web server. Then you'll be able to see both the files on your local computer and on the web server itself. You can then simply drag and drop files to transfer from one to the other. You can also use a command line interface such as SSH to transfer files. This method also gives you greater control of the server and gives you access to advanced controls that you might find helpful. If you're unfamiliar with command line, don't worry. Most websites you can get by just fine with just FTP. I should note that there are some specialized hosting solutions that provide other alternatives for uploading files. Many of these work pretty well. Drupal's primary means of messaging is email. The default arrangement is for Drupal to use the server's mail transfer agent to deliver email. You'll need one of these if you want to send email from your web server. Mail agents such as SendMail, QMail, or Exum are fairly standard on web servers, but it doesn't hurt to double check when you're looking for hosting. The last requirement is you're going to need some way of doing some database admin. Mainly, you're going to have to set up new databases. Each installation of Drupal is going to require one new database. It also might help if you have some way of visualizing that database. And while you're not going to use this very often, as you get into more advanced Drupal development, you're going to maybe want some way to see what's going on inside of your database. I know it sounds like we've covered a lot of different pieces for getting our Drupal site up and running. But don't worry about it too much, because there are many solutions that will give you everything you need in a single package. So let's take a look at some of the web hosting solutions that we can use for our sites. The first one is to run Drupal on your local personal computer. You actually can run an entire web server stack on a Windows or Mac PC. There are several packages that you can use to do this. There's even one that's specifically created for running Drupal websites called Acquia Damp. We'll be showing you how to use this solution in our next video. Installing Drupal on your local machine is a great way to develop and play around with Drupal. In fact, for much of this course, we'll be working with our local machines. Of course, this is not an appropriate way to run a website that is live on the web. For that, we need true hosting. Here we have several options. The simplest of these is the software as a service model, where Drupal is the software. This is also called a hosted Drupal service. SaaS is the easiest way to get up and running because all the technical stuff is taken care of for you, even the file uploading and ongoing maintenance. The best known solution for hosted Drupal is Acquia's Drupal Gardens. There are some drawbacks to the SaaS model, however. The main one is that you're often limited in how you can extend Drupal, particularly which modules you can use. This is why most people host their own website. Now, when I say they host their own, I don't mean that people have servers in their home or office. Most people use commercial hosting where they are leasing resources that reside in a managed data center. The most affordable option for web hosting is shared hosting. This is where your site is put on a server with many other websites. The advantage to this arrangement is that it is very affordable. Some services even cost less than $10 a month. The main disadvantage is performance. Oftentimes these servers are oversold, or other websites on the servers are hogging the resources, causing your site to slow down. Another disadvantage is that you're often limited to the changes that you can make on the server. For a basic Drupal site, that might not be a problem, but if you're looking to do more advanced websites, or you want to use more advanced admin tools, you might be blocked from doing so on a shared host. A second option is to get a dedicated server. You can get a dedicated server with all the server software you need pre-installed. Or if you have the admin skills, you can build it from the ground up. Modern dedicated servers will provide great performance for most websites. Dedicated servers do cost considerably more than shared hosting, often several $100s a month. Oftentimes a dedicated server is overkill for small organizations, yet shared hosting might not be enough. A great solution between these two is virtual hosting. This is where you share a slice of a server that helps keep costs down, but your resources are better controlled, giving you better and more predictable performance. You also have full control over how your server slice is configured. But what about the other end of the spectrum? What if your site needs more than what a single dedicated server can handle? The traditional solution is to use a farm of dedicated servers with sophisticated load balancing. But over the last couple of years, another more flexible solution has matured: cloud hosting. Cloud hosting is similar to virtual hosting, except instead of having a slice on a single server, the resources that you're using are actually fluid across multiple servers. A great feature of cloud hosting is that it is scalable without having to physically add servers. Additionally, you only pay for what you need, which is great, particularly if you have seasonal spikes in traffic. Reliable cloud hosting for typical websites with moderate traffic range from $40 to a few $100s a month. So which one is right for you? Well, that's a great debate with no simple answer. I would recommend Acquia Damp for developing and testing Drupal sites on your local machine. But for your live website, it often comes down to budget. Cloud hosting is a great place to start. If you really have a tight budget, your only choice might be shared hosting. For high traffic websites, you might want to look towards dedicated servers or high capacity cloud solutions. There are a few more pointers that you should be aware of. First, be aware of cheap hosting. Most budget-level solutions meet Drupal's minimum requirements, so they technically can run Drupal, but should they? While the performance might be fine for a basic Drupal site, as you add modules and complexity, you'll most likely notice a significant drop-off in speed. One hard limitation of many budget-level hosting providers is the amount of memory they allow for PHP. Drupal states that the minimum is 32 megabytes, but we have found that in practice that 96 to 128 is more appropriate. If you're going to be using cheap hosting, make sure that you can set the memory limit to at least 128 megs. The search engines love fast-loading websites. If traffic from the search engines like Google is important for your site, then double beware of cheap hosting. It's highly unlikely that cheap hosting will help your rankings. Many hosting providers offer control panels that have one-and-click installs of Drupal. It is recommended that you not use these, as they often lag in their updates and your site might develop security or other issues. And finally, video. Drupal is great for video, however most web servers, even the more expensive solutions, are not. If you do plan to host video that will be viewed by a significant number of people, you should look into hosting your video and other high bandwidth files on a content delivery network or CDN. Content delivery networks essentially take your files and host them all around the world, so you're always assured to have high bandwidth availability. In this tutorial, we covered the basic requirements for installing Drupal. I hope the hosting comparison and recommendations will help you find the right solution for your Drupal website. In later videos, we'll actually look at how to install Drupal both on a local computer and on a live web server.